Hello, everyone. I hope that everyone's doing well. I'm looking forward to engaging me and Iris, engaging you all in a Q&A today. Obviously, this conversation is being recorded, so if you're not able to attend the whole session, or there's someone you know that's not able to attend the session, it'll be available on the orientation website. So I'm going to start off by introductions. My name is Tremaine Jones. I'm a student success advocate. I use him, his pronouns, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Iris Moulton. I'm a student success advocate, she, her pronouns, and I work as a liaison with the Center for Disability and Access. If that's something that you will also have questions about, I can help with that. So student success advocates is kind of a unique feature at the University of Utah. It's not something that every university has. So we are a group of, I think there's about 11 of us, I'm not really sure. And we are there to support students through their entire time at the University of Utah. We help to find answers to questions they can't find answers to. We work to smooth the path toward graduation. So some of the things that we do is we can meet with students one-on-one wherever they are at the University of Utah, whether it's in their kind of the lobby of their dorm room or at lunch or outside. And during that time, we can do anything from coaching about time management skills, how to use a day planner, how to develop some study skills, helping them compose messages to professors that they might be dealing with a challenging situation. But we can also help them figure out which office to go to when it comes to things like finding scholarships or figuring out a major, those kinds of foundational questions of the university experience. Each student success advocate, we don't have an office, so we literally meet students where they are. We're just kind of walking around campus all day, meeting with people. And let's see, what else? We're kind of generalists, so where their academic advisor or the person they're working with in the registrar's office has a pretty refined and honed skill set to help solve specific problems, we tend to know a little bit about everything on campus and can at least get them pointed in the right direction. We also have personal relationships with people in each office, so sometimes when students hit a roadblock with something like, well, you know, I filled out the FAFSA, but I haven't seen it come through. What do I do? We can say like, oh, you can call this person, or let me walk you over to this office and we'll figure it out. So we can kind of build on that capital that we've developed at the university to help students solve problems and get that individualized attention.
Only thing I want to add before I answer the first question is, we're very, technologically advanced with things. Now with Zoom, we have another powerful tool that we have, but obviously we call tech students. We utilize cell phones that, where other offices have office phones. So that's a good amount of the flexibility for students. Thank you, Iris, for explaining that. I think the number is building up, 11 people here now. I'd like to answer the first question that Lydia Baird put into the chat box. And the question is, will the U plan on a traditional schedule for fall/winter? I've heard some schools may close from Thanksgiving to the end of January. So it was sent out last week, the beginning of last week, that the university would move to a schedule that was starting in August 24th and going to the end of Thanksgiving in person, where finals and last weeks of instructions will go through December 11th online. Now, however, there will be no fall break. Classes will run through that time period, and that's how it is now. I've not heard anything about anything to do with January. There's nothing been officially announced, so that could still be in the works. But for now, we are planning going back to campus August 24th and having a traditional fall schedule through Thanksgiving, minus us having to go to work, going to school during fall breaks. So I hope that answers the question. If there's any follow-ups or any other additional questions, please put them in the chat box, or we can have a Q&A discussion. Madeline just posted a return to campus.utah.edu that would be good to check out. I actually was on that website right before this conversation. So the next question from Christine. Thank you, Christine. How will the revised schedule affect out-of-state students who are planning to apply for Utah residency? So based on what I know is that as long as you are attending University of Utah, there isn't any impact on that. So like, obviously we know about the rules of having to stay in the state. As long as you're registering for classes and you do everything else, even if you're out of state, you should still be able to get your residency. Obviously, they're going to be taking those situations case by case. But with COVID, obviously it might not be possible for a student to stay in, so they're not going to be making that as a mark against you. So hopefully that helps. Obviously, Iris and I both can talk with students regarding that. But that's the most up-to-date answer that I have.
And yes, great, Tremaine. Just to quickly add to that, the Office of Admissions has updated their residency policy, and I'm going to go ahead and drop that website link in the chat box as well, because that will give some pretty specific information, because the Office of Admissions is really wonderful at taking residency by a case-by-case basis.
Thank you for your question, Christine. I mean, at this point, is there any thoughts? Like, I think that, like, when it comes to like Q&A, I know it's difficult because people might think they're stupid questions. I don't think when it comes down to this, there's not stupid questions. I think that ask whatever is on your mind, especially when it comes to your student attending the University of Utah. Obviously, things are a lot different this year. We might not have answers to everything, but collaboratively, out of all 16 of us that are on this Zoom, we'll be able to move toward an answer. So if there's any nervousness or anything like that, just ask the question and we can try to work on it together. Iris, do you want to take that question?
So a question came in through the chat about protocol for when the dorm students are testing positive or if they're exposed. I actually haven't seen the latest on that in terms of if there's going to be space reserved for isolation and quarantine. But I don't know if Sydney or Madeline can help find the link to this and drop it in the chat, but Housing has a list of FAQs that I was reading through this morning, and they have some kind of updated policies on how they're going to handle housing. I haven't seen if there's going to be a specific area intended for isolation and quarantine. So I'm not sure what their protocol will be for that. I don't know if Madeline or Sydney have new information about that.
I do not, but I do know exactly where those FAQs are, and I will send them there. I'm also going to take note of this question and see if we can get anyone from housing to weigh in and maybe send a follow-up email. That's a really good question. Iris and Tremaine, I just want to ask one question that might be helpful for parent and family members. So knowing that you all are student success advocates who work with students, can a parent and family member reach out to you and ask if you can contact their student or something like that?
The amount of parent calls is increased every year. We welcome having conversations with parents about different things. Obviously, FERPA is still in place regardless of what conversation we have. But we're always open for questions and we'll answer them as long as it's FERPA compliant.
Yeah, so we have a lot of parents who will reach out to us and say, can you follow up with my student? Or I told my student that you'll be contacting them. And, you know, we can only work off of the student's willingness to work with us. So I meet with a lot of parents who really want their student to work with a student success advocate. And I will reach out to the student multiple times, and sometimes they're just not interested. It's not the right time for them, in which case we just kind of have to let it go. And then also I make sure parents know when their student is willing to talk with us, that once we do that handoff, like Tremaine said, with FERPA is a privacy regulation. As soon as we are working with that student, I'm not reporting anything back to the parents. I'm just working as a support system for the student at that point. And the parent can get as much information they want from their student and that they can, but I won't be reporting back any personal or academic related information about the student. But of course, Tremaine and I are trained in any kind of like crisis management. We know all of those foundations at the U and who to reach out to if a student is in crisis or is in trouble, and we can just help to provide that wraparound support on campus. Tremaine and I received a question kind of housing related ahead of time, so I'll jump in and answer it. One of the questions that we got submitted when people registered was about ADA compliant housing and whether or not that's available currently at this time. At this time, since it's kind of so late in the process of signing up for housing, ADA housing cannot be guaranteed right now. But if your student is interested in ADA housing, we need to make sure that they have already applied for housing. And then if they haven't already made an intake appointment with the Center for Disability and Access, they need to do that right away. And we can find that link. Someone will put it in the chat for where to do an intake appointment with the Center for Disability and Access. They're doing them virtually, so they're still very much taking that. So we would like to make sure that all of that is in place to move forward. So if your student is interested in or needs that housing accommodation, make sure to take those steps as soon as you can.
And I'm going to address the next question from Heather Doyle, and kind of, you know, factor in Lydia's question into it too, because I can answer both in one response. So the backgrounds in education that student success advocates have, which makes us different from an academic advisor, is that an academic advisor is a specialist within an area. And they like using the word generalist, but we are well-rounded with the resource knowledge that we have. We have our hands in a lot of different places. We are very flexible with how we are able to work with a student, where academic advisors work on students with academics. We work with students on academics, their social lives, personal development, and everything. So I think that's the big difference between them. And education-wise, we all have at least a master's degree. There is one PhD holder out of the Student Success Advocate Group and a couple of PhD candidates, and I'm PhD students. So I think that we have well-rounded education in many different areas and many different experiences that we bring to that, which goes to the next question on if a student can work with the same SSA or is it based on availability. It's whatever the student prefers. There are students who work with multiple SSAs all the time. There's a couple students that I know that has worked with every SSA. So it just depends on the student's preference. And if they meet with Iris and says, oh, yeah, Iris, you know, I connected with you, but I feel like, you know, Jelani or Melanie can answer a question in a different way, then they can go and work with them too. We're not resources that have like, oh, this is our person. This is, you know, we're not like that when it comes down to that. So students have the flexibility. It's all based on what the student wants and what the student feels is needed for themselves.
And there are profiles on ssa.utah.edu where students can look through to see maybe there's a cultural match, or maybe there's a education match, or maybe there's something where they feel inclined to meet with one SSA over another, and that might be a good way for them to reach out. They can also send a general email to our general email address on ssa.utah.edu and maybe ask all of their questions there, and our office will maybe then say, oh, well, we know that this is the right person who will have most of that information. All of the SSA team has liaison areas where we kind of specialize with certain offices or certain colleges. So as I said, I work with the Center for Disability and Access. So I'm a great starting place for students who are trying to get plugged into that office. But I also work with the College of Engineering. And so I will often have a lot of different kinds of engineering students come through my metaphorical doors, since we don't have an office, where we can I can have a little bit more of a broad sense of what's going on with the College of Engineering, or policy changes, or new scholarship opportunities, or whatever it is, in a way that other SSAs might not. At the same time, if an engineering student was working with Tremaine and really liked working with Tremaine might just reach out to me and say, hey, do you know anything going on at the College of Engineering? So we want to work with the students on their terms and just make sure that they're getting the best information possible all the time, no matter who they're working with.
Thank you both for your questions. We have another question that I think both of us can chime in on. There are so many resources, so much information, but to clarify, students might have a general academic advisor, an advisor specific to their college major, and an SSA that provides additional support. The answer is yes. That's a simple question, or a simple answer, but like, the thing with the question is that the student can coordinate, can collaborate, all those resources as much as they like. I think that, and this is my opinion, I'm pretty sure Iris will give hers. My opinion is that students should use all of those resources, because it is very important that, you're paying for this education, these resources come with what you pay, so it's good to utilize them. But that's just my perspective on it.
Yeah, no, and I will also jump in right here. And so it is very true. Students have a lot of resources on campus, and it is a really large place, and it can be really hard to navigate. And so having and encouraging your students to really tap into all of those resources is so important, right? And so just to kind of clarify, the general academic advisor, if your student starts at the University of Utah as undeclared or undecided, they're still kind of exploring between some majors, their academic advisor is going to be more of the general advisors that work with the college, the academic advising center. So not necessarily a specific college at that point. They will move once they decide what major they're going to pursue, or if they're double majoring, that's where they might have two different college specific or major specific advisors. Some students are pursuing like pre-med or pre-law, and so those also have a different set of advisors. So again, so many different folks who want to see your students succeed here at the University of Utah. And the best thing about the SSAs is, right, like if your student has no idea where to start, because again, there are so many different places to start, the SSA is kind of like their best go-to person in order to kind of clarify of what direction like they should be headed, or who could best answer that question for them.
Thank you for your addition, Sydney. I think that Iris will take on the next question.
Sorry, I was just trying to find the appropriate link. So as far as computers for the College of Engineering, I've worked with students who use PCs, and I've worked with students who use Macs, and I haven't heard that there is any distinction between those two, or any one that's valuable over the other. That might kind of depend on which area of engineering that they're going into. So on the College of Engineering's website, you'll see there's like materials stuff, computer stuff, like all of these different things are housed under that big college. So that might depend on kind of which track they're in. So that would be actually a good question for their academic advisor in that college. I'm dropping into the chat now the admission information about the College of Engineering. So it is easy to switch from one major into engineering, but the School of Engineering does have its own requirements, as many colleges do, as far as what the GPA should be, how freshman and direct admission works, if you're coming in declared to engineering, to be declared as pre-engineering, if you're transferring from another school, if you're coming from an international situation. So all of those answers, situation dependent, are on the link that I put into the chat. And if your student is kind of concerned about whether or not they want to declare now, or if they want to think about it, or if they want to take some classes, there's a really strong academic advising support team at the College of Engineering that if the answer isn't on the FAQ page, they'll be able to find the answer.
Thank you for your question, Ben. One thing I want to mention before, we go to like a question that's on the field or wait for a question that is coming in is that obviously we have a lot of different collaborations on campus. Like what Iris said earlier, we all have liaisons, and some of my liaisons are wrapped up in education, business, school business, first generation resources. So places like TRIO, places like Center for Ethnic Student Affairs, places like First Gen Scholars, formerly known as the Beacon Scholars Program, the Dream Center, a lot of diversity initiatives like the Black Cultural Center, the American Indian Resource Center. So those are a lot of other places that that I personally collaborate with as well. And there's some sort of collaboration, like we have a student success advocate that works with students on the medical campus, particularly in nursing. And we have student success advocates that work with students in the social work program and social behavioral sciences and humanities and everywhere else. The ASUU, Binion Center. So, but we all get opportunities to collaborate with different people in the office. So in the 5 years I've been here, it's been pretty well-rounded on the resources that we've worked with. So in the meantime, while we wait on another question, how and when do you register for classes? So July 6th is the date for new students. That's first time and transfer students. So July 6th will be the date when we can, do that. And obviously us student success advocates are good people to collaborate with on finding the resources needed for the classes, but the student's academic advisor is actually the most important resource when it comes to that, because they actually have the expertise in the planning and the coordination of the classes. So I hope that that's helpful with the registering for classes piece question that we got before this session started.
Yep, and then I will hop in right here. So for your students, when they're registering for orientation, they're going to go ahead and receive an email from the Office of Orientation, just welcoming them to the University of Utah, and also sharing that they have received access to their Canvas course. Their Canvas course is where they will complete virtual orientation. And so that's kind of like the first step in this 4-step process. And so after they receive that email, they should all be receiving an email from their academic college welcoming them to the University of Utah, and also kind of outlining the steps of how that college is going to go ahead and host or facilitate academic advising for those students. And again, colleges are so different. We have some really small colleges, but also some really large colleges. And so there's not one specific way your student might be navigating or advising throughout orientation, right? If they're part of a college that are doing a wider kind of Zoom group meeting for advising, that might be the case for one of your students, but another student might be having an individual, like sign up for an individual appointment with an academic advisor. So there's everything that looks a little bit different with all of our academic colleges. So it's really important that your students are checking both their preferred email that they put on their orientation registration form, as well as their UMail, because they will be receiving communications to both. Try to encourage your students to shift over and really focus on their UMail, because the University of Utah does view that as their first kind of initial primary communication to students, and students just need to get into the habit of using their UMail. After they complete their virtual orientation, they will be shifting over and completing academic advising. And so both of those things need to be completed before July 6th, when your students can go ahead and register for courses. Your students have 2 holds on their account, and again, they learn all of this in their virtual orientation, but 1 hold is related to their virtual orientation on Canvas, and so the minute they complete those quizzes, their hold will be released. And then academic advising, they also have a hold on their account related to that. And so when they go ahead and meet with their academic advisor, whether it's in an individual setting or group setting, their academic college will be lifting that hold. Both holds need to be released in order for students to successfully register on July 6th.
And I'll take the next question that came up in the chat regarding on-campus employment. So you may have heard or may have noticed that after COVID kind of started happening, all what's deemed kind of non-essential or non-critical jobs at the University of Utah were canceled or put on kind of an indefinite hold. And that applies not only to the on-campus jobs that students would get, but also just a lot of pretty much everything else in every other office, whether it's a professorship or people up at the hospital or, you know, whatever job that was deemed sort of not essential for this time was completely canceled or put on an indefinite hold. So there are still some on-campus employment opportunities for students. And a great place to plug into that is the Career Services, Career and Professional Development office. They have listings. They also have a program called Handshake where students can log in with their university information and search for either paid internships, work study opportunities, or on-campus employment that will appear in Handshake. There's also trickling in us through our office, and I would assume Career and Professional Development and other offices are employment opportunities off campus. So we just got an email not that long ago about a hiring initiative from Cactus and Tropicals, which is a plant store that is off campus, but they're looking to hire some students from the University of Utah. So that information comes, you know, to SSAs and probably to some other offices on campus. So even if there is a hiring freeze on campus, there are community employment opportunities elsewhere in Salt Lake City that we or Professional Development Office can help get students plugged into.
So we're going to move on with the questions. So I'm going to answer kind of 2 in 1 real quick. So I want to jump to Heather Doyle's question on, can an incoming freshman contact an SSA now before they're on campus and get guidance? The short, easy question 2 is they can contact us as soon as this thing's over. We can give our contact info and the student can reach out to us and have these conversations starting now. So then goes into this another question. Would the students work with you all to find service opportunities? So yes, I mean, and there's more to it. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities. So I think it would be good to have a conversation on what people want to explore. One of the most popular ways to explore service opportunities is through what's known as the Community Service Center. The Binion Center has a great opportunity. They have many programs that are in their program. They have a Utah Reads program. They have alternative spring break and fall break program. They have many leadership organizations where there's a Utah Youth Day where they collaborate with many elementary schools in the city every spring. Obviously didn't happen this year, but typically it happens every year where they basically do a big service day, and they're always doing things like that. So obviously you can find out more. Sydney posted the Binion Center link. So that is the question from Estella. So thank you for that. And then another thing I'm going to attack is that Ben, if you could let me know if there's anything else that you need addressed on your question. I feel like Sydney went about it and answering your question in an appropriate way. But if there's anything that Sydney needs to add, you know, you can add.
Yeah, I'm happy to add. So it's a little funny kind of with this July 6th, right? Because orientation, regardless of what session your student signed up for, in that welcome email, there will be like a specific schedule for them because again, we are navigating the virtual space. There's a lot of moving pieces of orientation and there's a lot of dates to try to keep track of. And so in that welcome email, that is going to be the best resource for your student because again, right, like you all have students that are complete in different sessions. And so just make sure to, again, remind your student to check that email and to figure out what session they're a part of in order to kind of get the dates situated in your head and on the calendar, just to make sure students aren't missing deadlines. They can also check their new student orientation session on the website that I shared earlier with like the 4 steps. There's a button if your student forgot maybe what session they signed up for, they can go ahead and click that and it will remind them what session. So to Ben's question, as far as if you like, do you have to complete online orientation before registering for classes? Yes. And then what if you haven't had your orientation before July 6th? That is totally okay. Your student will again be given an outline of their schedule and their timeline for classes. Don't worry, students will continue to be able to get classes that they need, right? Like especially because of COVID and because of this idea of not all classes are going to be in person. There will be a lot more hybrid options and all online classes. So it will definitely be, your student will be able to find a schedule and work with their academic college to make sure they're good to go for fall. Ben, if you have any additional questions, I'm glad to further expand. Again, it's a really complicated process, but we try to do the best we can to outline your student's specific orientation timeline in that welcome email and provide them with specific dates so they know kind of how they're going to be moving along in this process.
And let's see, I want to piggyback a bit on the answer that Tremaine gave about service. If your student is considering or hoping to be like pre-med or pre-nursing, some of their service, they might want to consider some of their service opportunities in like a hospital situation or something that might give them an edge on an application. So I would encourage any of your students, if they are hoping to go, already know about a specific career or a specific college, maybe even the business school, if they will tell the Benyon Center and tell some of these service opportunity places on at the U what their long-term goals are, they can really help to tailor that service experience in a way that will give them an edge on an application. Obviously, any service is great on an application, but if they want to do something that's going to really move them a little bit further in those directions, make sure that they're vocal about that when they're talking about what they're looking for.
Awesome. And I quickly just want to touch on Ty's question. Is there a checklist or other program to see everything that is needed or recommended for freshman year? So I think your student's new student orientation is going to be a really valuable resource here because we have everything laid out in that virtual format. We have things on housing, academic advising, all the good stuff. But for you all as parents, we do have an online version of our parent and family orientation that you all have access to if you register. So I'm going to drop the registration link in the chat. And what this parent and family orientation is it's basically an overview of everything that we would have gone over in a in-person parent and family orientation, just in a virtual format. It's really great because it's not like on a scheduled day at a scheduled time. It's just like whenever you have the opportunity to log into this virtual parent orientation, you can navigate your way through it, see frequently asked questions, get an overview of like the academic advising process or the housing process. So I'm going to drop the registration link for that in the chat so you can get registered for that if you would like. And there's no cost associated with this virtual parent and family orientation. It's a free resource for parents. So I'll go ahead and drop that in right now.
And there is a specific page on that parent orientation that kind of gives you an idea of what your student is navigating. And so again, if you have kind of specific questions related to your student's orientation, that could also be a really good resource for you. So similar to what Madeline said, definitely check it out and sign up.
Thank you for all those responses to all those questions. And thank you all for your questions so far. We still have plenty of time in this session as the session goes to 11:30. So if you have any additional questions, please drop them in the box. And we have one question from Linda Kennedy. Can expenses Housing, tuition, all can be split between two parents, two separate accounts paying into a single student account. That's a good question. I think that might be a good opportunity for Sydney or Madeline or Iris to take that on.
Yes, happy to weigh in on this. So our income accounting and student loan services office, they have a lot of different options for payment plans, and you can pay in like segments for tuition. And the great thing is last year, the University of Utah rolled out like their one bill process. So all of housing, tuition, meal plan, you can find it on one bill. For those payment plans, I'll drop the link to income accounting and student loan services in the chat so you can see what that looks like. Keep in mind that tuition won't be posted, like the big bill with tuition won't be posted until about a week before classes start, or a couple weeks before classes start, and then won't be due until 2 weeks into the semester. So you have plenty of time to kind of work out what that tuition payment is going to look like.
Thank you. So I guess we're back to the square one. It'd be interesting to, okay, so we have a question from before the session that is as follows. In the time of COVID, how will the campus partners and resources be engaged? That's a very good question. And obviously, both Iris and I can respond to this, and obviously, expertise of Madeline and Sydney is also obviously from different perspectives is needed as well. So for me, my knowledge on campus partners is that they're utilizing Zoom, and that's like the easy question. That's the easy answer for me. Like, it's Zoom and being more intentional with outreach and stuff, because a lot of campus partners that I affiliate with, the ones I named earlier, they're really cool drop-by spots, as in they're there and students drop by. Students stay as long as they're comfortable staying, and they move to class or go home or do whatever else. And then when they have events, they all come together. So the short answer is Zoom. I've seen stuff through Zoom. There might be other answers on what has been going on with campus partners, but potentially, like, we've all been collaborating with campus partners even throughout the summer on planning for the fall. So I think that's another way too. So I feel like everyone is trying to utilize Zoom and other resources to keep students engaged with their organizations or offices.
And Tremaine is right. I'm going to drop a link into the chat, getinvolved.utah.edu. If your student is thinking about campus partners in terms of some of their own involvement, this is a great place to start. And it's constantly being updated right now in the age of COVID. At the bottom or middle of the page-ish, you'll see a lot of online events to discussions. And this, I think, is really helping to fill a need for students who are missing that in-person connection, especially incoming freshmen who are hoping college is an opportunity to meet people, make friends, and have conversations. So right now there are public events. There's one tomorrow at 11:30 called Racial Injustice, Trauma, and Allyship, and it's a community conversation. So if your student is interested in something like that, it's hosted by the Benyon Center, and it's online and Zoom. So in the age of COVID, like, the offices aren't just looking to be like available and, kind of ticking the boxes and getting the basic stuff done and checking out. Every single office is trying to find a way to meet students and exceed beyond just the basics of getting something done. So finding new ways to offer these offerings to students, even though the offices are closed or we have to have kind of social distancing rules when people are on campus. So right now there are ways, unfortunately, Tremaine's right, it's mostly on Zoom. So Zoom is still the right answer, but there are things, it's not just about, getting answers to questions. It is about trying to find ways to still engage students in the college experience, even if that has to be virtual. One of the questions that we got was, will there be any part-time jobs offered for students that are completely online? I don't know the answer to that question in terms of what the U has offered right now. That would be another place to plug into the Career and Professional Development Office to check that handshake account where there are online employment or there's employment opportunities, and you could check to see if there's online opportunities. You could reach out directly to the Career and Professional Development Center and check in. I do know that outside of the University of Utah, there are a lot of online job opportunities right now, with places like customer support for Amazon, things like that are available that aren't affiliated with the University of Utah. And some of those will appear on Handshake and will be available to talk about more through the Career and Professional Development Center, or working one-on-one with an SSA to kind of help find something that works for them if they would rather work with an SSA than another office. But right now I haven't heard of anything university specific that's completely online. It would not surprise me if that was available though.
And then just to build off of Iris's answer with the Career and Professional Development Center, we will have a virtual event for students with them later this month. So I am going to go ahead and drop that link in order to register for that specific session into the chat. So you can go ahead and either sign up or encourage your students to sign up and register, just to be able to maybe, again, talk to them a little bit more, learn about their resource and how they're navigating working with students and supporting students throughout the fall, knowing that we will have a good group of our students navigating the online space for fall semester.
If I'm missing anything, the question that was made on how I'd be able to contact the Career Professional Development Department. I think if you go on the careers website, you should be able to see at the bottom of the page contact information. So I hope that helps. And then Sydney just dropped the Career Professional Development event, so that'll be good information to learn at that event. So if there's no questions right now, there's one more. There's kind of two more questions we can address because there was a question that was, when you decide if classes will be held in the fall. That date was already passed. We'll be holding classes on campus. This next question is for students in Chapel Glen. What's the actual move out date for winter break, and when can they move back in for the spring semester? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know when. I know that online instruction will start after Thanksgiving. What I do not know is the housing rules and regulations for that. So if someone else can take that on, it'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, I just, important point here. So as we know, COVID-19 has made our situation kind of ever changing, right? So as much as we want to plan and make sure we have like concrete things in place to make sure students are successful, we've learned throughout this summer that we have to be really fluid with the way that we interact with our students or make plans. So as we our return to campus plan, that gets updated every time we make a change. So right now, the answer is we don't quite know what spring semester is going to look like. We probably think as long as numbers are going down, maybe we'll be able to go back to a normal semester, but we don't know quite yet. So please encourage your students to check out our website, stay engaged on our social medias and stuff like that, because this situation is an ever changing and very fluid situation, which we know can be frustrating, but we really are doing our best to make sure that students and parents are well informed. So make sure you're taking advantage of these resources, being online, coming to these virtual events, because as soon as we know information, we're ready to give it to you in a lot of different formats.
Thank you for your response, Madeline. Sydney, you're going to get in?
Yeah, really quick. So just to jump off of Madeline's response as far as everything's changing, I guess I will just hop on and just share, right? Like even if your student has already completed new student orientation, just know that they will always have access to that virtual orientation Canvas course. And so whenever our campus partners change something, housing being one of them, if they have any updates to their policy or their resources that they've pushed out to you and your students through the Canvas platform, we are going ahead and like updating that as well. And so just know that like that Canvas course continues to serve as a resource for your students. And so the information that housing updated regarding kind of the shift in like semester, not having a fall break and kind of being done with in-person classes at the end of the Thanksgiving break, I know housing has addressed a little bit of like there will be an ongoing kind of application process if your student does need housing in order to get them through finals. And so that information again has been updated on their website, similar to what Iris just plugged in the chat. It's also in Canvas and it's also in the parent and family orientation Canvas page. And so whenever there are like bigger decisions that our campus partners have been going ahead thinking through how they're going to make sure that they flex how they're, I guess, supporting students throughout the fall, we will also do our job on making sure that we're keeping like that information that we're pushing out through Canvas as updated as possible. So again, just know that your students will always have access to it. So just because they still see it on their Canvas homepage, I've received a few questions from students or parent and family members saying, my daughter or son have already completed Canvas. Why is it still showing up? That's totally fine. They will still have access to it so they can return and get some of that information if they need it at a later date. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there.
Thank you, Sydney. And there's one more question I was wanting to address from the pre-event questions. This particular family says, we are flying in from Illinois. Is there a way we can ship things ahead of time? And so is it there when we get there? So I don't know the answer to that, which is part of the reason why I saved that question for last, but Madeline will be able to chime in here.
Yeah, so you can ship things to be ready on move-in day. However, housing right now is asking that you try to limit the amount of things you ship. Hopefully no more than like 5 items, like whether they're large or small, just because space is limited in their mailroom at this time with COVID-19. Also, move-in day has shifted from a 1-day format to a 3-day format, which might give you a little bit of time if you need to like go to like IKEA in Utah and buy something there and bring it back. So yes, you can ship things, but housing is just asking folks to be strategic about how many things they ship. And you can't ship it more than 2 weeks in advance of move-in day, which is an important distinction. So don't ship it right now. Wait a little bit and you'll be good.
Thank you for the response, Madeline. We have about 10 minutes left. If there's any more questions that anyone has, you can come on the screen and ask or put in the chat box. If there's not any more questions, we can see if there's any final words from any of the hosts of this event and go from there. We have another question from Christine. And I think that Madeline might have to answer this one. Regarding that the 3-day move in process, when do students find out when they're assigned to move in?
Yes, that's a really good question. So that should be coming out in July. However, if you've already made travel plans for the original move-in day, housing will honor that. So like if you've already made travel plans, you don't need to change those. It's just when you get your assigned move-in day, you'll respond to the email saying, we're actually scheduled to come in at this time, and housing will say, okay, cool. So no worries there. You're good to go as far as move-in is. But that will come in July if you haven't made travel plans or you're waiting to get that assigned time. So I'm going to answer Stephanie's question as well really quick. That was, my student signed up for orientation this week. How does he know when to tune in for Zoom? So orientation itself is an asynchronous process. So there's no exact time that your student would have to log on with everyone else. They are able to navigate our Canvas course kind of on their own time. It's very flexible, and it shouldn't take them more than like 2 to 3 hours to complete. And they also don't have to complete it all in one sitting. They can leave, take a break, come back, do some today, some tomorrow, whatever works for them. The only time they might need to log on to a Zoom is when they're meeting with their academic advisor or with their academic college. And so their academic college should have sent them an email letting them know how to set up an appointment or a connection at that point. That's the only time they would need to log on. So there's not really a schedule because they can do it all on their own time, all whenever they want. We've gotten submissions at like 4 in the morning, and I'm like, get some sleep, but orientation's cool too. So there's no worries. It's a very flexible process.
Yep, and then just to build off of that response from Madeline, Stephanie, your son should have, or your student, sorry, your student should have received an email with the schedule that's specific to his session or to their session. And so if they need a reminder of that, feel free to reach out to our office, and I will go ahead and just put our email in here, and we can go ahead and try to resend that. But your student should, if the session is this week, should already be navigating through the virtual orientation on Canvas, like Madeline said, and should have already received communication from the academic college in regards to academic advising and what their game plan is for that.
Also, Sydney and Madeline, can you address the additional parts of that question that we have not had an appointment time?
Yep, so I'm going to just go ahead and put my direct email in, and then Stephanie, I'm happy to help you figure it all out for your student.
Okay, we have about 5-6 minutes left. Is there any more questions that anyone has? Well, okay, thank you all for this wonderful last hour. Any last words, Iris?
I was just going to say, if anyone, maybe it's not a question, maybe it's just a concern, or if you just want to get something off your chest, or if you feel like your student has some specific concerns, go ahead and you can drop it into the chat or let us know, and it might be a good way for us to address something else or to get plugged into your student. And yeah, we just have about 5 minutes left, so maybe no one has any concerns. Maybe we solved everything.
Sydney, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Sydney. We can't hear you. We cannot hear you, Sydney.
I'm going to take over for our lovely Sydney Magana here. So we are going to go ahead and end this session. Thank you all so much for joining us. Just keep in mind, like, obviously there are a ton of resources at the University of Utah for your student to be successful. And I think what sets us all apart is that we really want your student to be successful. Like, we are like itching for emails and everything, just to make sure that your student really kicks their first year off right, even though it might not be the first year that anyone had in mind. So please feel free to reach out to the Office of Orientation and Transition at any time with any questions. Also, our wonderful SSAs have put their direct contact information in the chat. Again, I can't plug enough that the SSAs are text friendly, which is so nice and so convenient. So if your student has a question, like, they can just text them and the SSAs can help out. They also might be receiving texts from the Office of Orientation and Transition. So we're really here to make sure that your student has a seamless transition from high school to college. But thank you all so much. We'll go ahead and conclude, and we hope to see you at some of our other virtual events throughout the summer.